Welcome to Dead Man Talking. Tonight's story is from the incredible mind of Peyton over on Reddit. As ever, please do let me know what you thought down below in the comments box. Please do like and share. It really does help build the channel and our community further. And why not hashtag TeamFEAR and DMT's Cryptid crew. And so, with that aside, let's get into tonight's story, entitled Tree People. Let's get straight into that. I grew up in the Ozark National Forest, way off on the old dusty roads that ran near the township of Fern. Nothing special, no stores, pretty much nothing but a bunch of meth-fueled hillbillies, hunters and poor southern gospel types. I lived on an old dirt road, and there was nothing to do when I was real little except walk that road and explore the forest and creek beds. I am the oldest of 4 sisters by 7 years, and so most of my time was spent off alone trying to avoid them. I had secret hideouts all over the woods, stashes of baby dolls, antique dishes and other types of secret treasures for little girls were hidden under the twisting roots of ancient trees all throughout my mama's property. They are probably still out there, somewhere. And down the road a ways off, back into the woods, was a small creek and a little old family plot or potter's cemetery. The stones were old. I imagine that all the writing had worn off from the unpredictable weather in the region. You never knew how the weather down here was gonna be, one day until the next. If I had to guess it though, I would say that that old graveyard was probably from around the Civil War era. Now, I had always heard whispers about things from folks, the neighbours' kids, my mama's friends when they would all come over and sit and talk in our kitchen, and the hunters who would be sure to stop on the ATVs to tell me, "Y'all need to stay out of them woods there, little un." Whispers of lots of things. Leaf rustlers, Sasquatch, Wendigos, little people, etc. You see, sometimes people just disappear in the Ozark National Forest. Nothing left but their boots, and everyone was always worried about us girls. I still love to roam those woods, creek beds and old dirt roads though. I never did believe much in that stuff, even as such a little child. I was more worried about getting snake bit or mauled by a bear or being attacked by a big old buck in a rut. Thinking back on it, it is only by the grace of God I am still alive today, as many close calls with all of his wonderful creatures I did have back in them woods. I was summer of 2001 when I first thought I saw them. We had just had a big thunderstorm the night before. It rained hard. Hardest I had ever seen it rain that I could remember. The roads were a muddy mess and I was down playing beaver in the ditches that ran alongside them, building dams of rocks, sticks, mud and leaves. Very important business for a 10-year-old child. Mr. Ray from down the road had pulled up alongside of me in his big green truck to warn me to stay out of the creek that ran alongside the old cemetery. "Now, Miss Annie, you stay out of that water back yonder. I see you down there playing all the time and it's moving too fast today. It'll sweep you up and carry you all the way out to the ocean if you get in there after all this rain," he said. "Yes, sir," I said. To which he replied, "Good girl. Now you tell your mama I said hi and that I'll be by to have a look at y'all's furnace later this evening. Keep an eye on the little sisters. Goodbye, girl." I smiled big at him and shook my head in agreement, waved wildly and yelled, "Goodbye, Mr. Ray. I'll tell my mama. You have a good day." All the while knowing the first thing that I was going to do, as soon as that man's truck was out of sight, was to go straight down to that muddy old creek he had just told me to stay away from. The little creek that ran alongside the old graveyard was usually what one might call a fair-weather creek. I suspect it was created by the runoff from the nearby mountains and hills, maybe 2 or 3 feet at its deepest points, when it even had water flowing through it at about 5 or 6 feet wide. Some might call it a stream, but we always called it a creek. It was just an hour or two before twilight when Mr. Ray came through and left, and when I started off into the woods down to that creek, on an old game trail I like to use as a path. The air was hot and dense, pretty typical of the hard rain down around that area. I could hear what sounded like a quiet roar in the distance. I had also noticed what sounded like the occasional giggle coming from the trees that surrounded me. I was a logical child, and I brushed it off to be the sounds of birds chirping and branches creaking from the weight of the heavy rain the nights before. When I finally got to the creek, I immediately came to the conclusion that Mr. Ray was an honest and trustworthy man, as the little creek it seemed to have turned into a dangerous and swift river, its banks nearly reaching the boundaries of the old plot on either side. The water was dark with sediment from the forest floor, and little sticks and leaves raced and swirled within its borders. Once you got close, the creek was so loud that you almost couldn't even hear yourself think, booming and thundering. The sound of water flowing quickly over rocks and branches, and dragging whatever wasn't rooted in well right along with it. And there I was, standing right where the neighbour had told me not to go, staring into the water and contemplating my adolescent mind how I was ever going to get across it to the other side. But despite the violent thrashing sound of all that rushing water, I thought I heard something else. I quickly raised my head and glared into the trees nearby. I could hear something like murmurs, like many people speaking all around me. Weird birds, I thought to myself. Soon I spotted a narrowed area in the creek. I looked around for a branch or a log I could lay across, and eventually found one I thought would be suitable for my mission. I had to act quickly. The sun would be setting shortly, and I needed to make it to the graveyard and back across before nightfall. The mission was important, but I was a logical child and knew that graveyards were filled with ghosts once the sun sets. As soon as I found what seemed to be like a large sturdy branch, I went straight to work. First I tested it by standing on top and jumping up and down a few times. Once I was satisfied that the old twig would bear my weight, I began to pull it down the bank to the narrow spot in the water. Yanking on, shoving and rolling that long skinny hunk of stump, I finally got it across the small section of the rumbling river. Relief. My mission might conclude today, after all. At the moment I stepped on that thing, I heard the loudest, shrillest scream I'd ever heard in my life. I stopped dead in my tracks. Mama caught me directly disobeying Mr. Ray, and I was fixing to get an ass-whooping of a lifetime. I slowly looked up, anticipating the sharp sting of her. "What the hell is the matter with you, girl?" look. And what I saw instead terrified me more than one of my mother's looks had ever even thought of. Across from me, across the creek, in the tree line next to the old cemetery, there are at least 30 people. Men, women and children. Strange as it sounds, it seemed that they weren't people at all, or at least not anymore. They were all barefoot and their skin was dark and reddish, like the clay along the sides of the roads. It looked rough and dirty, kind of like the bark of a cedar tree or something. Their hair was matted with moss, leaves and twigs. Their faces were motionless as they peeked out from behind the branches of the oaks and evergreens. The thing that struck me the most about them, though, was the way their eyes looked. As the sun was setting and the forest was becoming dark, I was faced with all these strangers. Their eyes are what bewildered me the most. They all seemed to have white eyes. It was almost like they glowed. Hastily, I stepped back onto the bank of the creek, obviously aborting my previous expedition. Unforeseen circumstances. Just then my makeshift bridge washed down the creek, hit a large rock and burst into what seemed like a million pieces. Seizing this opportunity, I turned and ran as fast as I could back to the road where Mr. Ray had stopped me a few hours earlier. I could hear the murmurs and giggles all around as I ran back through them woods, and I didn't dare look back. In fact, being a logical child who eventually grew into a logical adult, I never went back to that particular spot at all. I still roamed around the dirt roads for a few more years before Mama picked up and moved us all to town. Sometimes I go back and drive those old roads and I swear I can see the silhouettes of people out there in those trees. I don't know what their intentions were that day. Sometimes I think maybe they only wanted to save me from getting washed away all the way down to the ocean. And sometimes I wonder if maybe they planned to take me away from my mama and my family. All I know for sure is that folks still go missing in the Ozark National Forest with nothing left to find but their boots. Wow, 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 wow. Certainly another one. Wow. Short but sweet and pretty creepy story there from the awesome Peyton Annie over on Reddit No Sleep. Big thank you, Peyton, for allowing me to narrate your incredible story on the show. I really hope you enjoyed my rendition and certainly look forward to more of your work in the future. Guys and girls, as ever, you know the drill. Please do let me know what you thought down below in the comments box. Please do like and share. It really does help with the channel and our community further. And why not hashtag TeamFEAR and DMT's Cryptid crew. If you're an aspiring writer or would just like to have a crack at things like myself, please do get in touch with me at the usual email as on screen, which is dmtforestofear@gmail.com. I really look forward to hearing from you. Hope everybody's had a cracking start to the week, getting stuck in whether you're studying or working, whatever it is that you do. And you're trying to keep fit and focused during these testing times. But above all, guys, remember, be safe, not sorry.